It's been a little bit since we talked specifically about Warzone and kind of the problem that it's currently having. There's a lot of issues that kind of stem back from Warzone 2, where they did a bunch of changes, but there's a bunch of other things that it seems like they're just letting lack. And part of that's just leading to a stale game. And I think a lot of people can kind of agree with that the game does feel relatively stale, even though if you are actually playing it, it does feel like it's in an okay state. So I wanted to talk about kind of what's leading to that staleness and maybe talk about some of the issues and even get some suggestions on how they can improve it, because we're going to be stuck with this particular map and this kind of game until we get BO6 that comes out later this year. And the integration is still going to happen. It just doesn't look like we're going to get a new map until next year based off the leaks. That's supposed to be Verdansk sometimes in March, April, somewhere around there, and we'll be able to get that. And if it's stale now, it's definitely going to be stale in October, November, December, if they're not really making any of the changes that I think a lot of people actually want to see. So one of the biggest things that we'll go ahead and talk about specifically is weapon balance. I think this is single-handedly one of the worst things they've done since Warzone 2. Obviously, we had the RPK meta for 100 days, Lockman sub, kind of very limited on what we had. But when we reflect kind of on Warzone 1, we had a ton of weapons and tons of metas and tons of variety that even if you weren't using the hardcore meta, you still had like a slightly lower tier of weapon that you could still use and not feel like you're forced or pigeonholed into being and using the meta, which kind of sucks. So I went to get and put together this real quick. I wanted to see if it was just kind of a feeling that they really hadn't made good changes, or if it was just kind of that's the reality of what's happened. So I went back and I went through every patch notes. Those are available on the Call of Duty website, and you can look at all the various patches with different dates. December 14th, January 11th. There's multiple other updates in between that, but either there wasn't really any weapon changes, maybe they fixed a bug or whatever that didn't relate to weapons. And this includes pretty much every weapon change we got, except for those instances where it said it moved the range from 12 meters to 12.5, basically a non-existent buff or nerf. I left those off, but still gave us plenty to look at. And here's the problem. You can kind of look through, you can see a lot of minor buffs in there, but for the most part, a lot of these minor buffs were essentially useless. They took it from being absolute garbage to just garbage, right? And that doesn't really make it part of the pool. So they're almost like faux changes to make it look like they're actually doing some kind of change to the game, but it doesn't actually impact in a meaningful way, which is bad because it doesn't allow us to mix up or change the meta in any meaningful way, and it doesn't allow other weapons to compete. So when I went and taking a look at this, I saw that there was 38 minor nerfs, 22 noticeable, where it's like, damn, I leveled up this gun, it felt okay, or it might not even, like, it was just barely viable, and they nerf it. And it's like, damn, now I can't use that anymore. That goes to the garbage pile. And then there's a bunch of minor buffs. Some of those fall into the ones where the range is, or 1 damage value, it went from 29 to 30, and it didn't actually change the shots to kill. It's like, what's the point? It didn't actually do anything. And there's only like one, maybe a couple other ones we can argue on, that there was maybe 1 or up to 5 maybe noticeable buffs, but I couldn't really think of any. When I went through and I looked at that, I was like, I don't really feel like that impacted the game. XRK Stalker was probably one of the main noticeable ones. That's what I put because it allowed it to be a one-shot. People asked for that when the gun dropped. It took them a while, but it came around and got to it. But for the vast majority, but no one's using these. What the hell? Like, what are we doing? So I also wanted to discuss another topic where people were like, well, they can't buff everything because, you know, everything will be broken and it'll be too powerful. But that's not necessarily how it works either. We talked about this while I was streaming, kind of get your guys' thoughts on it. So we'll discuss that portion as well, because I think buffing stuff dramatically helps casual players in addition to just people that sweat on the game and level up and grind and no life and they play nothing else. They don't care. They already have everything maxed out. So let's go ahead and talk about that portion. So one thing that Warzone 1 struggled with initially was a power creep, but they eventually came around and figured it out. And a power creep, for simple phrasing, let's say that we have these 3 different TTK lines. Essentially, these are the TTKs that we have in Warzone. The lower the number, the faster the TTK. Let's say this number is at 600 milliseconds for a close range, 650, and then we have 700. Usually if a weapon crosses above the 650, 700 range, it basically doesn't get used. If a gun goes below 600, it's considered incredibly broken. Usually the sweet spot is somewhere around 610, up to about 635. That's kind of where we've seen most of our most favorable consistent metas. And if there's multiple guns within that range, people will enjoy picking other things. Even if a gun has great movement and all these other good statistics, if its TTK is 700, we just don't use it, no matter how broken it is, or theoretically how broken it would be, just because the ADS could be bad, the bullet velocity, the damage per mag, there's a lot of variables. And realistically, all they've done is done this. They've basically taken guns that were already in the 635 range, or maybe not even, they were at that 650 range, and they effectively made them worse, taking them out of the viable range, which is usually within this 650 to 600 range, where people can enjoy, hey, you know what? I want to try that gun. Great. That's, you know, it's not meta, but I have fun with it. I really enjoy the Lockman's Shroud, for example. Not me in particular. I'm just throwing out a gun. One of my favorite guns is the Kastov 7.62, right? That's one of my favorite guns. 5.45 would have been cool, but it was never good. You know, it's like, I want to use it, but I'm at a huge disadvantage, so there's not much of a point. So what I would say is make noticeable improvements where you can actually make guns join the meta. And we still have more talking points that I want to talk about, but I wanted to focus on these specifically. So an example of this is the Rival 9. It has never been meta in Warzone. It has a 660 TTK, as we can see here. The FGX Horus, we can see at 610. Pretty solid. The Superi, even after the nerf, still has a combination shot of around 630. Still very much in the meta. Realistically, they couldn't lower the shots to kill in this case because it would bring it down to 594. The Rival 9 would be incredibly broken, and we don't necessarily want that. We want it to be usable because if it's incredibly broken, it'll get nerfed. So really all they can do is increase the fire rate. So if I increase the fire rate to 950, boom, comes down to 632. Baha, there it is. It's competitive with the Superi. It has a fast fire rate, faster than the Superior, not quite as fast as the FGX Horus, and boom, we have a good option as another meta option without being completely broken. It still kills slower than the FGX Horus, and that's just one example that took no thought at all, and we are able to solve that. We went through on stream, we did this for multiple guns, and just show how simple that is. And then if it does end up being too good, increase the recoil, lower the bullet velocity. There's other things you can do. Lower the sprint of fire, increase the sprint of fire, increase the mag. MX9, another gun that has these types of issues. MX9, boom, 741, 648 TTK. Very competitive, but not quite competitive enough. We need a bigger damage per mag, which we would have if we got the mag upgraded from 32 or whatever the hell it is, and we bump that up to, let's say, 780. And boom, all of a sudden 615 TTK, it's right in there with the FGX Horus, and people would say, you know what? Might not be meta, but I like using that gun. And this is what they're not doing. I mean, this takes me how long to do? Literally no time at all to figure that out. And if it is a little bit broken, then we dial it back. But the goal should be getting close to this number so that we can have 20 guns within this range and people can pick and choose what they want. There will always be a meta. I don't determine the meta. You just playing the game doesn't determine the meta. As a community, the meta gets determined on its own. We go join up, we spectate randoms. 9 out of 10 people will use the same guns just because they want to be as competitive as possible, especially with an environment around skill-based matchmaking. So I think this is probably one of the biggest leading causes, because even when we went from Verdansk to Verdansk 84, not significant map changes. We can't I mean, did they change the map? Yes, they added Nakatomi Tower, they added Summit, they changed some other POIs slightly, changed the overall color theme, whatever. That wasn't the thing. It was that we had nice, fresh, consistent metas. And even if you didn't want to use the meta, you could still use the Kilo. You could still use about 10 other guns. And this comes to the other part. The snipers were insanely broken in Warzone 1, and the game still felt great. And that goes back to weapon balancing. I think you can make as many snipers one shot, pretty broken, decent bullet velocity, maybe a lot of flinch, But the counter that we had back in Warzone 1 is we didn't have this weird visual shake, which they tried to cut down on, but they just need to remove it entirely. It's not a good gameplay mechanic. On top of that, we had better bullet velocity, so you could actually shoot somebody at range, and the recoils were a little bit more consistent for a lot more guns. So if you wanted to shoot with the Grau, you could. The Kilo, you could. The M4, you could. The AMAX, you could. All these guns, you could shoot people at 110 meters. Yes, that is less skillful, but COD isn't necessarily about skillful. If we're looking for a skillful game, go play Valorant, CSGO, right? Like, the COD has never been that. What made Warzone 1 so great, it was approachable, and it was easy to play. Anyone could pick up, and you could shoot straight, be accurate, and you can get into actual gunfights. And if people wanted to snipe, let them snipe. You could shoot them from 150 meters or however long, and you can actually deal with those types of players. Now, you kind of have to run like a coward, if we're being honest. If you're going up against a Kar 98 or an actually good one-shotting sniper for infinite range, you're going to end up having to deal with people, and you can't really do much. You kind of work your way to close the distance. If you get more like BR and less like Call of Duty, Warzone suffers. And that's really the problem that I think they did with Warzone 1. It was like a battle royale that was Call of Duty. Call of Duty game that happened to be a battle royale, not the battle royale that happened to be Call of Duty. That they shouldn't lean into that, and that's kind of been a problem. So I think that's part of it. So you get that balance of making everyone happy. You can shoot people that snipe. If they snipe you, you're like, damn, good shot. You know, make it challenging on both sides, and I think they miss part of that. And like a lot of people argue, oh well, they do these things for the bundles, and it's like that doesn't even make sense. You can go to the store right now, and 80% of the classes, setups, the guns are trash. There's no reason to ever touch them. Maybe you want the skin with the execution or the voice lines or whatever. Cool, more power to you. But if you're buying them for the bundles that when you change an attachment, they look like trash, makes no sense from a money perspective. And all these, the selling point of, hey, we're going to get these MW2 guns in MW3, it's kind of a waste because literally none, maybe one, but literally almost none are viable, and that's terrible. So I think those could address a lot of issues. I think the game was more simplistic in Warzone 1. The rumor is they're getting rid of backpacks with BO6. Or when we get integration, we're going to get rid of the backpack system, which simplifies it. The reality is when you're thinking of a Call of Duty, what made it successful is gun-on-gun action, and if it impacts that in a negative way or a positive way, you got to make decisions based off that. Backpack, great for Battle Royale, great for a lot of things, but it's not great for gun-on-gun action. There's no element in that is good for gun-on-gun action. Holding 20 smokes, 20 semtex, drill charges, 20 streaks, 100 self-revives, none of those things are good for gunplay. Gun-on-gun action is just that. You see the other person, you guys shoot each other. If you have your lethal and tactical, you use them. Hopefully you have restock or munitions because you're not going to get them back. You don't have a backpack full of them. They would replace it hopefully with a satchel. So I think getting back to those things, that'll help. But the weapon thing is such an easy fix. Like just play with it. Easy. The other part is they give us ranked, which a lot of people want to rank back. I'm not part of that group. I tried ranked. I think ranked's fun, but not resurgence for 3 or 4 seasons. Like what? Why didn't we get big map ranked? Like even if you don't like big map, like obviously big map's been totally neglected, like just completely ignored. Like what the, like who's going to play big map? There's nothing to play for. Oh, cool. I get a nuke. Yeah. Oh, 5th game. I ran into a cheater. You know, you can't even control that part. Not that the cheating is incredibly rampant, because obviously it has its highs and lows. Sometimes it gets bad and then, you know, they figure it out. It gets good. And then, you know, it kind of has that cycle, which is inevitable. Right now, I feel like there's a lot of people talking about it. So it's probably at a little bit of a worse peak, and then it'll go ahead and drop again. And that's kind of the part of Ricochet. It kind of reacts to new cheats, and it kind of got, so I don't blame it on that. I mean, obviously I wish it was perfect, but it is what it is. That's kind of just how hacking works when a game is popular. On top of that, it hurts to play the game when you actually want to play a specific mode. So if I want to go play Resurgence solos right now, I have to wait a half an hour between matches, unless I die off rip, and then I hope I could queue in again. you literally have to wait a half an hour to get back into Rebirth. Like, if I want to play Rebirth, I either have to play one of these other random modes with randoms, or if I want to play solos, then I have to wait for Fortune's Keep and Vondel, and it's like, or if I want to play Vondel, I have to wait a half an hour between matches. Like, I don't know who thought that that was a good idea. Like, I know some games do map rotation or whatever, but usually they're comparable. Like, I have no interest in playing Vondel anymore. Like, what are we doing? Like, the map count, the player, the flow, all those things are completely different. I get they're both small maps, but it's terrible. The other thing that people have to deal with, and that I see all the time, I don't typically deal with it. I don't know if I just because I'm living in LA, but my connections are generally pretty good. I know I had an issue where I thought I had terrible connections. It was just a driver update that ruined everything. I had to roll it back. That fixed all my issues. People get shadow banned. They say they're not cheating. Then they use unlock tools, and it's like, well, duh, you got banned. You're an idiot for, you know, using an unlock tool or any other cheats. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things. So I thought I would address some of those things just because I know that like other people are having issues with the game. They're calling it stale, boring, whatever. That's the biggest issue for me. I'm still enjoying the game, doing some camos. Then we get new content every week. Like total missed opportunities. Nearly every aftermarket part is useless. Literally useless. Worse than the base version of the game. Like, why not just throw some junk out there and, oh, it's broken, jump on it, grind the hell out of it for 1 week and then like nerf it next week. Who cares, right? Just something different to shake it up. I literally log on. It's the same two weapons, long range. Either probably the Holger, either if you like the 26 or the 5.56. SVA, which we've been using for 4 months. Like, come on, guys, what are we doing? And then we get the close range is like, all right, cool. Superi took over. We nerf it so it doesn't even change the damage profile relatively. And then we're still using Superi. FJX, Horus, cool. And it's like, cool, that's all we got. They nerfed, oh, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. If you think I left anything out, why the game's stale, let me know in the comments. Appreciate all the support. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.